Okay, so this is going to be a flip lesson on three more organelles that we find in cells. And those three organelles are the Golgi complex, the ER, and the ribosomes. So the first one, the Golgi complex, we need to understand that this organelle also has a ton of surface area so that it can be very efficient. And if you recall, there's many organelles that are like that, including the mitochondria, the chloroplast, to name a few. So remember, we are talking about structure and function. So we really need to understand how the structure of this Golgi complex, the way that it looks, helps with its function. So as you can see here, it has multiple stacks of membranes. Okay, so it doesn't just have one line of a stack of a membrane, it actually has multiple, as you can see here. It's just stacked on each other. It almost looks like pancakes stacked on each other. And this stack of pancakes, or what we call cisternae, are part of the Golgi complex. The Golgi apparatus is another name for it. So that's the way it looks. Now, the job of it, what is the function? The function of it is to gather molecules. So what I'm underlining is really important. And what they do, what this organelle does with those molecules, is it combines them, and then it basically will send, it'll receive proteins from the ER, which we'll talk about in a minute, and package them so that it can be distributed throughout the cell and even outside the cell. Another function of the Golgi complex is that it builds lysosomes. And lysosomes we'll learn about in another mini lesson, okay? So again, what does it do? It combines molecules. I'm going to try to write this. Molecules. The function of it combines molecules, and it combines it with other molecules. And what it ends up making is larger molecules. And then it will package those and distribute those. So these molecules that it makes also, it doesn't make these, but it also receives molecules from other organelles. And the proteins are what is one of the things that it receives. So it'll literally, it's kind of like it just packages and distributes things. So it's kind of like a FedEx or UPS station, okay? So these things come in, and then it packages them and distributes them. And it'll do that throughout the cell or outside the cell, wherever it's needed in the body. Another key thing that it does is it makes lysosomes. And pretty much lysosomes are like, we're going to learn about them later, but they are full of enzymes, and they go around and they gather molecules and digest them and break them down. Okay, so they're like little mini stomachs. Okay, so that's the Golgi complex. That's the structure. Just think of flat pancakes. The next thing we're going to talk about is the ER. Now remember, the Golgi actually receives the products from the ER and then packages and distributes them. But first, what is the structure like? So the structure of the ER, or endoplasmic reticulum, is definitely a large structure. You can see here it's actually adjacent to the nucleus. So you see how close it is to the nucleus. It has lots of folds and pleats in it, as you can see here. So this orangish color thing is the ER. And this is actually where protein synthesis occurs. And protein synthesis is how the cell makes proteins. It is the production of proteins. So these folded sacs Again, we have lots of surface area here again, just like we have with the Golgi complex, the mitochondria, the chloroplasts. Lots of surface area so that it can actually produce these proteins efficiently and quickly. Okay? You'll notice that there's actually a rough ER and there's a smooth one. The rough one is where proteins are made, and then the smooth one is where lipids are made. And lipids are basically fats. Okay, so lipids is a fancy word for fats, because there are beneficial fats that we need in our body and actually at the cellular level. Okay, so again, protein synthesis. Synthesis, you guys, is just a fancy word for the making of. So the ER makes proteins, okay? It also makes lipids if you're talking about the smooth ER, okay? Now the function, I kind of overlapped a little bit there. The function of it is that it's the site for protein and lipid synthesis. And then eventually these things will be transported out of the cell, and then they go throughout the body wherever they're needed, okay? But it does that and sends it to the Golgi. So the ER and the Golgi work together, okay? So again, we have the ER. This is the protein maker, okay? It sends those proteins in little sacs to the Golgi because the Golgi packages that. So it packages that and distributes it. Okay. So that's that. Okay. So the ER. Remember, there's a rough and a smooth. The rough one makes protein. The smooth one makes lipids. The ER has lots of surface area. It has these stacked pleats and folds. So that increases the surface area. And again, I'm going to reiterate the whole surface area thing. Remember, we put SA for surface area. That makes it more efficient. Because if it just had one little sac, it could only make that much protein. But since it has many sacs piled upon each other in a very condensed fashion, it makes it super duper efficient. Okay? The last one we're going to talk about are ribosomes. Ribosomes are spheres that we see all throughout the cytoplasm in the cell. We have some that are actually attached to the ER, and that makes it have a rough appearance. Okay, so if you see an ER like in this picture and it had dots on it everywhere, those dots are ribosomes. Okay, and that rough appearance is why it's called the rough ER. Okay, the function of the ribosomes is to make proteins and lysosomes. Okay, so it makes proteins and lysosomes. All right, so if we were to tie this all together, I'm going to tie this all together. What we have here in this picture, if you look, is we have the nucleus, and then we have the ER, and then beyond that in the cytoplasm is the Golgi, okay? And then all throughout the cytoplasm and attached to some ERs are the ribosomes, okay? So what I want you to get out of this, you guys, is that it's pretty complex, okay? These cells are pretty complex. And we're going to learn that this type of complex cell is what we call a eukaryotic cell, okay? And eukaryotic cells are very complex. There's all these different mini organs inside. Each of them have a job, as you've heard with all these little mini lessons, okay? The exact opposite of a eukaryotic cell is a prokaryotic cell. And the only living thing on the earth that is a prokaryotic cell are bacteria. So they don't have any of these organelles that we've gone over. It's pretty much very simple, and we'll get into that type later, okay? And that's the end.